everyone. This is John Daly. I'm here again with Bernie Goldberg for another episode of the No BS Zone. How's it going today, Bernie?
Just fine, John. How are you?
Doing good. So we wanted to get one last episode in before the holidays. So there's not a whole lot going on in the national news cycle right now, I think because of the holidays. But one story of note is that the January 6th committee released its final report, or at least an executive summary of that report. The rest of it should come out a little bit later this week. But they wrapped up things by issuing 4 criminal referrals for Donald Trump. And we wanted to talk about that a little bit today. Go ahead, Bernie.
Well, there are things we know and things we don't know at this point. What we know, whether you like Donald Trump or not, we know certain things. We know that he lied about a stolen election. There was no evidence to suggest the election was stolen. And if you want to think he didn't lie, that he really believes it, so it's not a lie, then he's delusional. If I think that I'm a better home run hitter than Aaron Judge, you know what that makes me, John? Makes me nuts because I'm not a better home run hitter than Aaron Judge. So Donald Trump doesn't get off the hook because he really believes that the election was stolen. It wasn't. The other thing we know is that he was the first president in the entire history of the United States who tried to stay in power even after he lost. And we know one other thing, that he held a rally on January 6, 2021, egged on the crowd that stormed the Capitol. That's what we know. Again, whether you like Donald Trump or not, those are indisputable facts. What we don't know is if what he did amounts to a crime or crimes. And what we don't know, and this may be the most important question, if they are crimes, should he, as a former president of the United States of America, should he be charged, tried, and possibly sent to prison?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I should throw out just the 4 different charges, the 4 crimes that he's being accused of by the committee. First one is obstruction of an official proceeding. Then there's conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to make a false statement, and incitement of an insurrection. And yeah, it's one thing that's sort of interesting about this is that it is for the committee to do this, it is purely symbolic because the Justice Department has been doing its own investigation, and they will ultimately be the ones to decide whether or not to charge him with the crime. Bernie, does it make sense to you that they even made such referrals to the committee?
Well, I think it gives ammunition to critics of the committee to say this is all political because it has all the effect, as the Wall Street Journal editorial put it, it has all the power of an interoffice memo. The
Right.
Justice Department is under absolutely no obligation to act on the referrals. And given all the controversy over the makeup of the committee, it'll look political if they if if they well, let me put it this way, it'll look political because they made a referral that has no power.
Right. And I do think, the report that they have and the interview transcripts, those will be, I think, important. It's good to have that information. I think they'll be handing that off to the DOJ, so that could conceivably help with whatever investigation is going over on that end. But yeah, it is purely symbolic, and I don't think it's the referrals are going to change anyone's mind. I guess I'm not too worried about it further polarizing the country because I think everybody's already sort of made up their mind on it. But I think you're right. It probably does give a little bit of ammunition to those that have been trying to say it's all about politics. So I think that's a fair point.
I think I'm not a lawyer. Let's get that on the record early on, and I'm not going to pretend to be one. But there are thoughtful people. Uh, some are partisans, but others are just plain thoughtful people on both sides of this issue. Some say what he did clearly was a crime. Some say, well, no, it's not a crime to make a speech, even if the speech eggs on people, you know, to do what they did to riot at the Capitol. Uh, even Donald Trump has First Amendment rights, political speech is protected speech. And there are others on the other side that say, are you kidding? Everything he did was a crime. I don't know. I mean, I'll talk about things I know, but I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a constitutional scholar. I don't know. But I do know this, John. If he is charged, uh, if he is made to stand trial, if he is convicted, I'm not going to lose any sleep over any of that. Because even though I'm not a lawyer, I know one thing about what he did. What he did was wrong. That's, I hope even Trump's most loyal supporters will acknowledge that much. What he did was wrong. Whether it was criminal or not, that's, that's for other people to decide because, as I say, reasonable, thoughtful, smart people come down on either side of that issue. But the more important issue, if there's a more important issue, if we're grading this by importance, is even if he did all the things the select committee says he did, even if he did all those things, should a former president of the United States of America be charged and possibly be sent to prison? You know, the old saying, nobody is above the law. Well, that's a nice thing to believe in theory. But don't we have to consider, and I'm only raising this as a question, don't we have to consider the consequences of a trial? We're already a deeply divided, I believe, deeply divided and dangerously divided nation. What do you think a trial of Donald Trump would do? It would divide us even more if that's scary. That's a scary thought. That doesn't mean he shouldn't be charged and tried, but let's not pretend that there are no consequences to such a decision. We're divided as is, we'll be divided even more, and that'll be even more dangerous than it is already.
Yeah, and I think things would have played out. I don't even think we'd be here right now if things had played out, a bit differently. My position all along has been that, after January 6th, Trump should have. That I know we're not in complete agreement here, but I think Trump should have been impeached and convicted. I think it was the appropriate thing to do, and I think had he been held accountable in that way, there probably wouldn't have been a January 6th committee, at least not one that went this deep. Though I do think it's good that we now know as much as we do. I think it's good for the public record at minimum. And if he had been impeached, ironically, I think the Republican Party would certainly be a lot better off as well, and the GOP would probably hold strong majorities in both the House and the Senate, as of next month. But that's a political consideration. I just think the impeachment was appropriate. I don't think we'd even be throwing around the idea of criminal charges if that had happened.
Actually, I agree with what you just said. The only reason at the time that I was against impeachment, the only reason, it wasn't because I thought Donald Trump did nothing wrong. The only reason I was against impeachment is had 10 more minutes in office. I
Right.
mean, not literally 10 minutes, but symbolically 10 minutes. And I
Close.
figured, he's on his way out anyway. Are you really going to impeach him at this point, at this late date? Let him go. What I didn't factor in to my brilliant analysis is that he just won't go away. He just won't go away. On the question of whether the authorities should charge him and try him and all that, I would prefer, if it were up to me, if I could wave a magic wand, I would prefer that the voters make that decision about Donald Trump and not prosecutors at the Department of Justice. That's what I would prefer. And I would prefer that they send him a message, we don't want you, we don't like you, you've done too much harm. But the DOJ is going to have to make a decision. And if they make a decision, if they get to him before the electorate gets to him, as I say, I'm not losing any sleep over that.
Right. And I still think, even with these referrals, they were, interesting. They were, dramatic, announcement. But I still think Trump's, and from everything I've read, I still think Trump's biggest legal threats aren't really they don't really line up with the focus of the January 6th committee. I think they're going to be this possible election tampering situation with Georgia. You know, the phone calls he
Exactly,
made, Raffensperger, also the
exactly.
classified government documents that he took down to Mar-a-Lago. I think those are the more likely. I think we're more likely to see some sort of indictment in one of those. I don't know if we will, but I think it's definitely more likely than any of the things that the committee referred.
Yeah, and where if he's charged, where he's tried becomes a big issue. If the Georgia case goes to court and he's tried in downtown Atlanta, I mean, not good for Donald Trump. And if he's charged under any of the four referrals that the House Select Committee made to the Justice Department, generally speaking, you don't know what 12 jurors are going to do, but generally speaking, John, if he's charged in Washington, D.C., I think Donald Trump's new residence will be a prison cell. If he's charged and goes to trial in Alabama or Idaho or Nebraska or someplace, some ruby red state, I don't think he'll be convicted. That's something that makes me feel uncomfortable, by the way. A jury in Washington, to use one example, they're not going to be friendly to Donald Trump. And one more thing, there are people out there, some people who are well-known people, who don't. He'll never be charged. Come on, what are you kidding? This is nonsense. This referral meant nothing, and don't be so sure of that. I'm not making any predictions about whether he will be charged, but I'm not betting he won't be charged. He did things that were wrong. Whether they were criminal or not, they were wrong. And somebody may say, including the special prosecutor, I'm just looking at the facts here. I'm indicting him. So anybody who thinks that this is all a fairy tale, a make-believe story that isn't going to actually come to anything, don't be so sure of that. What do you think, John?
Yeah, yeah, no, I think that's true. I think conventional wisdom has sort of gone out the door on on everything in recent years. So you never know what's going to happen. You never know, what information is being investigated that we don't even know about right now. There might be even some more damning stuff out there that's going to come out. So yeah, I don't think, you know, uh, a president and a former president. I do think you have to take things a little bit more lightly when you're looking into them, for criminal charges. But at the same time, you also want to have this idea that no one is above the law. I know presidents to some degree are, and other people are, but you want to at least try to get it to a point where no one's above the law.
Forgive in advance, please, everybody. Forgive a silly analogy. Nobody's above the law? Okay. If I'm walking down the street and I jaywalk, or I take out a pack of chewing gum and throw the wrapper on the sidewalk, a cop can justifiably stop me and hand me a ticket, and I would have to pay a fine. That makes sense, right? Are you really going to take, if Joe Biden walks down the street and jaywalks or litters, are we really going to charge the president of the United States with the crime? So you could say that nobody is above the law, but that's not true in reality. Now, what Donald Trump did was not jaywalking or littering. That's why the analogy is a silly analogy. If Donald Trump shot somebody and killed somebody on Fifth Avenue, as he once famously said, well, you have to charge him for that, right? So there's something in between littering and murdering somebody, if you're a president or a former president, where you're going to be charged. And whether or not egging on a crowd that rioted and the other three charges amount to a criminal offense, it's a close call. But again, the important point, even if it is criminal, the prosecutors are going to have to weigh the consequences of charging a former president, and not just any former president, but this particular former president, knowing how rabid his diehard supporters can be. If he's charged, we're going to have problems. And maybe I shouldn't have made that prediction, because precisely because I think it's true. That's a reason not to make a prediction that trouble would lie ahead if he's charged. I hope if he's charged, I hope everybody accepts that. Let's see how it plays out. But that may be wishful thinking.
Right, right. So, sort of along those same lines about what to do as far as charging individuals. So the January 6th committee, they also referred 4 Republican congressmen to the House Ethics Committee for defying subpoenas. This includes Kevin McCarthy and Jim Jordan. Some may remember that Jordan was denied entry onto an earlier iteration of the January 6th committee, in part because of his Stop the Steal efforts. It was seen sort of as a conflict of interest. Bernie, do you see anything happening to these 4 congressmen, or is this just more symbolism?
Nothing will happen to them. And this goes back to the initial problem. It's complicated as to why the panel was so heavily Democratic. You've written elegantly and eloquently, both elegantly and eloquently about it. There could have been more Republicans. Nancy Pelosi didn't want certain Republicans. Kevin McCarthy said, if you don't want the people I picked, then I'm not going to play your game and all that. But a reference to the ethics committee looks political, like everything else in this thing looks political. The fact that the TV show, the hearings, were produced by a producer, by a television producer, makes it look political. Maybe, getting back to what you said, if he had been impeached and convicted, we
Right.
wouldn't be going through all this. But Donald Trump has supporters, and they won't acknowledge the one thing that I think is absolutely beyond dispute, that he didn't, and never will have the character that's required to be the president of a great country like the United States of America. And that's where the whole thing starts. The whole thing starts. The American people made a mistake. I understand why they made a mistake. For the 1,000th time, let me say, I get why people voted for him in 2016. They thought he was better than Hillary. I get why they voted for him in 2020. They thought he was better than Joe Biden. I get all that. But after January 6th, after he tried to stay in power, after he tried to be the first president ever in this country to not relinquish power peacefully. If he had his way, he wouldn't have relinquished power at all. To support him after all of that is unacceptable in my mind. I don't want to socialize with people like that. I don't want to have conversations really with people like that. And the mistake that was made at the jump. We elected somebody who was never fit for office. And everything flowed from that one election in 2016.
Right, right. Well, one issue regarding the committee that I've been thinking about a bit lately is the future of Liz Cheney. She was perhaps the most prominent figure on the January 6th committee. Safe to say, she sacrificed her political career to do what, at least in my view, was absolutely the right thing. To me, she's a patriot. She has character. She's a profile in courage. She put the country and constitution before her political party. And I know a lot of people, a lot of members here, when they hear me saying that, are probably rolling their eyes. But I think they'd all probably agree with everything I just said if it was a Democratic president that had done all these things. She was serving on a committee doing exactly what she did with Trump. Bernie, what are your thoughts on the future of Liz Cheney? Do you think she's done with public service altogether? Can she ever get back into the fray, do you think?
Before I get to that, let me just pick up on what you said about a Democratic president. To all my friends out there who still think Donald Trump is either a good person or should be reelected or anything along those lines. Let's imagine, and I've said this before, but I think it's worth repeating. Let's imagine Barack Obama ran for reelection as he did, but he lost. And he said the election was stolen. And he had lawyers go to 60 different courtrooms and he lost every single time. And then he had his vice president, Joe Biden, He tried to get Joe Biden to stop the electoral count that would confirm the new president. Let's say the new president was Donald Trump. And then he held a rally out in Washington, D.C., and egged on his most gullible supporters with lies about how the election was stolen. And they stormed the Capitol. How would you, my friends out there listening right now, who still support Donald Trump, how would you feel about Barack Obama? How would you feel about Barack Obama? I know how you'd feel, and you know how you'd feel. And if you feel any differently about Donald Trump, you have no principles. You just like Donald Trump because he's sort of like you. You know, you don't like the establishment, he doesn't like the establishment. You want to drain the swamp, he wants to drain the swamp. He's a fighter, you're a fighter. I get all that. But if you don't accept what Barack Obama would have done, but you do accept what Donald Trump did, then you're not speaking about principles. You're speaking about being practical. As for Liz Cheney, let me just say a word or two about Greg Gutfeld, who's become a really little nasty twerp. Last night, or the other night, he was on bad-mouthing Liz Cheney, just up and down, really nasty stuff. Liz Cheney has what Greg Gutfeld and many others on his team don't have. She has principles. She believes that Donald Trump was a menace and a danger to the United States of America. So do I believe that. A threat to democracy. When you want to stay in power after you lost an election, yeah, that's a threat to democracy. And because Greg Gutfeld knows who his audience is, he caters to that audience. There's too much of that. That's all I want to say about cable news and how unprincipled they are. But Liz Cheney, I don't think has a future in mainstream politics. I don't think she intends to run for office again. But I think she has a future. I mean, maybe she'll be on TV, maybe she'll write a book. She's not going anywhere. She's got a voice, she's articulate, she's intelligent, but traditional politics, I don't think she has a future. And that speaks more about the current Republican Party than it does about Liz Cheney, as far as I'm concerned.
No, I agree. I sometimes think about, who, you look at who's popular with the Republican base these days. She's right down at the bottom, and you think about, you know, uh, some of the some not just Trump, but some of his, his big followers in Congress, Boebert and Green, and you just think about how much more popular they are. And yeah, it kind of makes me, I left the Republican Party back in 2016. And they've never made me miss them in that way. They never made me want to come back. I'm still open to it at some point once the party gets its act together. But if there's not room for someone like Liz Cheney, I'm not sure there's room for someone like me in there.
Or me, a head-to-head contest in either Wyoming or Georgia between Marjorie Taylor Greene and Liz Cheney. Marjorie Taylor Greene would win.
Yeah, absolutely.
End of discussion. End
Yeah,
of discussion.
yeah, and
Marjorie
it wouldn't
Taylor
be
Greene,
close.
and it wouldn't be close. A wacko of wacko proportions would beat Liz Cheney.
Right.
And there are some people listening to us now who are intelligent, who are thoughtful, who are saying, yeah, and that's the way it should be. I can't deal
That's
with
true.
that. I can't deal. By the way,
No,
a final word for me. I'm writing a piece about what we're talking about today, so there'll be a little more detail, a little more nuance, and that'll be up on Monday, a couple of days from now.
great, great. Well, that's probably a good place to go ahead and end things. Well, I did, this is going to go out right before the Christmas holiday hits, so we want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, and you'll be hearing a little bit from us, I guess, probably not in the episode format, but before the end of the year, we'll still putting pieces out. Bernie said his piece is coming out Monday. We got the Friday Q&A and all that stuff. But is there anything you'd like to say, Bernie, to members today?
I would shamelessly like to say, It's not too late. It's not too late to give a gift either to yourself or to your loved ones or to your liberal friends to drive them crazy. You can have them subscribe. You can get them a gift subscription to this website so they can get conversations like this, the audio reports, the columns, the Q&A on Fridays. It's not too late. It's never too late. But Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah to everybody out there.
Great, and all that's available from bernardgoldberg.com. Just go there. You can get a subscription yourself. Everything's right there. All right, Bernie, it was great talking to you, and you have a great rest of your week. All right.
You too, John.